So thank you very much for joining us today. We're very excited that you could make time for this webinar. This is the second webinar of the webinar series of the ACTonNBS project. My name is Juraj Jurig. I'm Director of Nature-Based Solutions Program at the Global Infrastructure Basel Foundation in Switzerland, and I will be moderating this session on behalf of the project consortium. For those of you who don't know us, we are a project that is funded by Climate Kick, EIT Climate Kick, and we are coordinating a growing ecosystem of cities that are collaborating on climate adaptation strategies using primarily nature-based solutions. So we are supporting our city network with needed knowledge, technical and financial expertise, a network, of course, to allow them to properly address their climate and social vulnerabilities. Today, I'm very excited because the topic is, of course, nature-based solutions for health and well-being, and that's my favorite topic because the contribution of nature-based solutions to health and well-being is very interesting. It's, of course, a lot of research is needed, but there's already a lot of information that we have at hand that we can use to kind of use it as a basis for decisions in our cities and regions to implement more nature-based solutions. So we have three speakers today who will demonstrate the importance of nature-based solutions in delivering health benefits, and of course, how to create healthy, resilient, and inclusive urban fabric. Regarding the webinar structure, you will hear three presentations, and at the end there will be a Q&A session. So you will have the opportunity to ask questions through the chat function, but of course I encourage you to use the chat function as we go, and we will try to answer all your questions or as many questions as possible until the end of the webinar. The webinar will be also recorded, so you will be able to use it in the future as well as a knowledge material. So let me introduce you the first speaker, who is Claudia De Luca. Claudia is a PhD candidate of the Department of Architecture at the University of Bologna. She's an environmental scientist, now focusing on sustainable urban and spatial planning and urban and rural regeneration processes. And Claudia will give a presentation about of course, she will use the current literature regarding nature-based solutions and their impact on health and well-being in cities. But she will also include a brief presentation of a survey that was done in Bologna during the COVID-19 lockdown, which is very interesting, where she will elaborate a little bit on the importance of green spaces in the lockdown situations. So thank you very much, Claudia. The floor is yours. I hope you can hear us.
I can hear you very well.
That's perfect. Yeah, it's perfect. Thank you.
Hi everybody. Good morning, and thanks a lot, Juraj, for the nice introduction, and thanks to all of you for joining us today. I'll try to share my screen. Please let me know if it's working well.
Yes.
Now start seeing it, and I'm now putting the presentation mode. It's working well.
Yes, we can see it. Yeah, it's perfect.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. So as Juraj was saying, I will briefly introduce you to the main topic of the webinar today. I'm also part of the ACTonNBS project, as Juraj was saying, so we are working together on basically trying to expand this ecosystem of cities, and it's kind of a different approach from the, let's say, Horizon 2020 project. So we focus much on really understanding and consulting cities on which are their needs, based, of course, on the research. So we build upon the project that are already running, and we really try to reach the city to share the knowledge with them. The presentation of today that I will be sharing with you will be based on some lesson learned from a survey, as Juraj was saying, that we developed and distributed in the city of Bologna during the first lockdown, let's say, because there have been not many more, but some more after that. And what was the role of nature in that part? So let's say the table of content of the presentation today is to briefly give you an overview of what do we mean with nature in city and why it's important, its relation with health and well-being for citizens, and at the same time, which was, and if there was, an impact on citizens' perception, let's say, of greening in the city during the COVID-19 lockdown. Nature in the city, I don't know, I mean, it's a bit hard always to do this kind of webinar because you'll never know who's on the other side of the camera. But I suppose the many of you already know the topic, so what we are speaking about and why. But the concept of nature in the city, it's a very, let's say, multi-measure, multidimensional, and multidisciplinary topic. And the different discipline over the time call it in different way. So there are a lot of definition to define the concept of nature in the city. Some of you could be more familiar, for example, with the concept of green belts if you are an architect, or with ecological and wildlife corridor if you are more coming from an ecological background. But then there are some terms that are now, let's say, widespread, at least in the European research and in the European Union also policy framework. There are, let's say, ecosystem services, green and blue infrastructure that respectively represent the benefits that the nature is giving us and the features that this nature is actually appearing in our city. And at the very end, I mean, I put it at the very end because it's one of the most modern, let's say, concept is the concept of nature-based solution. Within our project, and I believe in most of the European funded project, we refer to nature-based solution as the definition given by the Commission in 2016. So this, the main difference, let's say, with the previous concept is that here we are not just referring to the nature in city and to the natural features we find in the city, but we really think about nature as a possible solution to the challenges that we identify. So if the challenge is quality of life, we think that nature in the city can actually improve quality of life of our citizens. Same apply with health. If our challenge is public health, we should start thinking if there are some nature or nature-based solution that we could use to improve that challenge. And another main and very important feature of this nature-based solution is that, of course, they simultaneously provide co-benefits. So if we are designing a solution for quality of life, the same nature is actually able to provide us also benefit in terms, for example, of climate regulation, because this is an intrinsic characteristic of the nature that we include in cities. In terms of why we are speaking about nature-based solution and health, the idea here is that we refer to all the natural features that are presenting in the current, let's say, green and blue infrastructure of the city. So we are referring to nature as urban park, urban forest, green roof and walls. So even like hybrid solution, let's say, urban drainage system, rain gardens, I mean, several features, and the list could have been longer. And the idea is to try to understand which are the services and functions that these areas can provide. And we mostly refer here to two main functions referring to the ecosystem services framework. So the regulating function that is more related, as I was saying before, to the environmental and the climate benefits derived by nature, as, for example, the cooling effect or the water management effect. And on the other side, all that big word about cultural service that are a bit hard to imagine and to shape, because these are, let's say, intangible benefits, but it's all the services that derive from the use that we as humans and as citizens make of nature. So when we go to nature and we experience and we enjoy nature, there are some indirect benefits that can really impact on our health. So there are some benefits that are more related, as you see in the second part, with stress release and depression release, with the children cognitive development also. But there are also other direct benefits more related with the regulating ecosystem services that, of course, affect, for example, our respiratory system, the cancer incidence, or the stroke reduction. And this is also very much related with the fact that we enjoy to walk and to make physical activities in the green areas of the city. And there are a lot of studies that proved that the more green areas we have in our city, the more we will move. So this is, let's say, the overall background. I know it's quite a lot of information, But in the following presentation, Claire will go much deeper into this, so you will have also the opportunity to know more about this. Concerning the COVID, so why we decided to develop this survey during the lockdown, it's not because we were bored at home, because there was quite some work from our side at the moment, but it was much more because as planners, we see that there was an incredibly rising interest about the future of our cities. Cities have been at the center of the pandemic and are still at the center of it. And not just the future of our city, but there was a really public discussion for one of the first time, as I have memory at least, for the way we plan our city, we live our city, and how we can actually also move within our city. So this raised as a really public interest, much more than it was before. And the survey we designed basically aimed at responding to two main questions. So first of all, this lockdown somehow changed the perception that human citizens have about nature in the city. And there was a change in individual behaviors during the lockdown. And this is fundamental because, of course, if citizens value more the benefits and the green area that are in the city, then planners and decision makers should make decisions based on that, so based on the increased value of those services. I will show you today some preliminary results. So this is about how the survey was distributed. So as I was saying before, this was distributing during the strict lockdown. So we were at home and there was no access to green area in that moment in Bologna. We received 1,070 answers, so quite much. 500 of them were coming from Bologna because the survey distribution was focused on Bologna, but not limited to. So there were answers also coming from other places around. These are a bit the demographic data. So we had more female than male replying, with a pretty high, let's say, educational background. So most of them as either a bachelor or a master. And most of them were actually more than a half coming from the population that was from 26 to 35. Of course, this could lead, let's say, to some bias in the analysis, but yeah, we are aware of this and there's nothing more that we could do about that. In the case of the city of Bologna, we also asked questions based on the districts that people were coming from. And on the right side here, you can see the map and how many replies we receive in each district. And the idea here was to understand if there was some kind of relation in the perception city have and in the amount of greening that was present in that exact district. This was not easy to do then, because as you see, we have districts when we have almost 100 respondents and other where we are just 8. So, I mean, it was a bit hard then to define, but still there were some nice outcomes. Regarding the city, so we really asked the people if they believe that there was a change in their perception, and most of the people, more than 50%, say that there was. And this was, I mean, I think really interesting, and this opened a huge discussion after. It is about the house where people were living. So we asked them if they were thinking about moving in the lockdown because they didn't have any green in their place. And as you can see here, more than a half answered yes, but either, yeah, they are thinking about it or they cannot, but they would. So, I mean, I think it's quite a big percentage there. And we also asked people if there was a shift, let's say, in their preferences regarding the activities that they could do in the green areas. And I think it's pretty interesting to say that if before the lockdown, just 8% of the people put as first priority leisure and recreation alone, so just the fact to go there and enjoy it yourself, this percentage raised up to 25% during the lockdown. So there was much more awareness of the fact that even if I'm alone, so it's not anymore like a social relation or anything, but it's just my feeling about staying in the green, there was a big range in this. And this was actually, let's say, it was stealing percentage by the climate and environmental benefits. So there was not as much important during that phase as they were before. We also asked them, since there was a huge focus on mobility, which means of transport people were normally used, and if they were thinking about choosing a more sustainable way of moving. The public transport users basically replied no, because I mean, at least more than 65%. Of course, because this is already kind of sustainable transport. The private car user, mostly for safety reasons, are not willing to change their habits, and the same apply for the motorcycle user. Then what we asked is basically if they believe that they are, let's say, willing to change some behavior, what will they do? And I think this is pretty interesting. So people would actually invest part of their resources in caring more about private green, but they are also keen to invest part of their time in the public green maintenance. And I think this is really interesting for planners. And last, we also asked them, in terms of having more space for green instead of cars, if people would be keen in walking more to reach their parking spots. And there was, I mean, a very differentiated answers here, but there is a wide range of people that would work up to 10 minutes to reach their car. So I think this is also pretty interesting. The first thoughts that we have on these, and some of are actually open question, and I'm also really curious to hear your thought about it. So I think there is a strong possibility to boost citizens' role in co-design, co-develop, and co-maintain public areas. Most of them replied that they would invest time into it. There is a need to better understand what does it mean, this willingness, so what they are really able to do. There could be some idea of including incentives for private green maintenance and implementation from the public side. There was a big discussion, I'm not sure if this makes sense in the long term, but to rethink also social distancing in green areas, as you see in the pictures. And also at the very end, how can we better understand the values on citizen preferences? As for the mobility, and I'm going to conclude, the overall change actually opens some possibility to boost sustainable mobility, even though we say in numbers now that people went back to private cars because they don't feel safe in public transport. So there should be more resources dedicated to it. Maybe there should be incentives for sustainable individual mobility. We had these bike incentives in Italy. Not sure how it worked, but still, I mean, it was a tentative, let's say. And also to rethink the space dedicating to cars. I leave you with this image that is coming from the New York Times. And I mean, to some of you that know Barcelona could also remind that the big plan that they have there. So the sentence here is, I've seen a future without cars, and it's amazing because we don't have to forget that cars, it's not just about pollution, but it's also about space that could be dedicated to something else. And we need space. We notice it in the lockdown even more. So that will be the very last point that I wanted to highlight. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Claudia. Thank you very much for a great presentation. I like the image, the grass in the kind of a chess pattern. It's really interesting, and it looks great, I think. Yeah, thank you so much for the kind of setting the stage for the topic and also for the survey. I think it's very interesting to see the shift in kind of populations' perceptions of the importance of nature, and it would be interesting to see kind of if there was research done in any other cities, how that would kind of end up. I'm sure there was, but just to compare that, it would be interesting to see. Yeah, thank you very much. As Claudia mentioned, in the next presentation, we will go a little bit deeper into different indicators, perhaps. And I would like to introduce the second speaker, who is Clair Cooper. Clair is a PhD candidate with the Horizon 2020 Naturvation program, which is an interdisciplinary partnership involving 14 institutions from across Europe. Clair's role is to investigate how the characteristics of nature-based solutions are distributed within the urban realm and how they relate to social, urban, and public health inequalities. Regarding the presentation of Clair, the presentation will show how different types of nature-based solutions relate to mortality indicators in cities and how they contribute to kind of overall health outcomes. Since these results are still not published, if you would like to use them, please ask Claire for the permission, or to cite them properly, so it is clear that it comes from her work. So yeah, I think I would like to invite you, Claire, for the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jurek. Great introduction there. I'll just try and share my slides. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about some of the findings from my research today. What I'm going to do to start is I'm going to follow on from what Claudia's presentation outlined, and briefly just give you a little bit of background context to the data that I'm presenting today. And then I'll talk about the method that I've used, and then I'll go into some specifics on results. So just to give you some background. So across urban Europe, about cardiovascular disease already accounts for more than half of all cause mortality, despite the fact that premature heart disease and stroke is preventable in 80% of cases. Now, genetic makeup and socioeconomic position obviously influence the prevalence of the disease, but also other factors such as mental health, our diet, obesity and inactivity also play a role in increasing risk factors. But it's not just that, the incidence of warmer temperatures associated with our changing climate and air pollution are some of the most prevalent factors in terms of increasing incidence of cardiovascular disease and all-cause mortality today across Europe. Now, in addition to problems associated with mortality due to heart disease and respiratory disease, mental health problems such as depression, anxiety disorders, alcohol and drug-related disorders affect more than 1 in 6 people every year. And their total cost in terms of healthcare across Europe amounts to over 6 billion euros. Now, whilst mortality due to mental health disorders, and that doesn't just include things like self-harm, but also neurological diseases, accounts for about 3.5%. But research is increasingly suggesting that the trauma associated with exposing people to the ill health effects of climate change could impose and increase the risk of mental health conditions throughout Europe. So why this context? Well, the Naturvation project, from which I'm part of, has collected over 1,000 case studies of different types of NBS across European cities. And over 50% of these aim to positively influence health and well-being through the provision of, in particular, cultural ecosystem services for recreation, improving physical and mental health, but also things like aesthetic appreciation. But they also aim to influence health indirectly by regulating the heat effects from climate change, improving air quality, reducing noise pollution, but also improving urban biodiversity, which also has a bearing on health outcomes. So hence we wanted in this study to kind of investigate what is the relationship between the distribution of the different characteristics of NBS and how they relate to health. So to do this, we focused on health effects at a societal scale, but we also examined what's happening at a neighbourhood level as well. But today I'm focusing on the results of that work at a city scale. Now, many of you may know that secondary data on health outcomes is quite limited. So for our study, we analysed 5 mortality indicators that were published by the Urban Audit, and that's publicly available data that anyone can access from Eurostat. It's a pan-European data set consisting of a host of different quality of life indicators. Now, we wanted to examine the relationship between those mortality indicators and different types of characteristics of NBS. So we looked at their ecological domain, the type of ecosystem service, but also things like the mode of governance, the actors involved, and the participatory methods. Now, there's a lot there. So today, I'm just going to be presenting a selection of results from some chi-squared analysis of the relationship between ecological domains and ecosystem services and how they relate to all-cause mortality and death due to heart and respiratory disease. So just moving on to the results now. So our study found that, as you can see from this table here, I've summarised the size effect results for each of these indicators. And you can see that for different types of external green buildings, such as green walls, roofs and balconies, that had a more small to moderate size effect on mortality due to heart or respiratory disease. Now, these findings are consistent with a number of other studies that suggest that external green buildings play a role in the removal of pollutants such as carbon dioxide and particulate matter, which have a role to play in increased morbidity and mortality due to not only cardiovascular and respiratory diseases, but other blood-related disorders such as deep vein thrombosis. We also found that some types of urban parks and botanical gardens were also small to moderately associated with mortality due to heart respiratory disease as well. And again, these results are consistent with an increasing number of studies that suggest that getting outdoors and connecting with nature reduces acute and chronic levels of stress that have been linked to adverse health outcomes. And finally, we also found that sea coasts were quite strongly related to mortality due to respiratory and heart disease. And again, these findings concur with a number of studies that are beginning to suggest that living near to bodies of water or visiting coastal areas are associated with improved health outcomes. Next, we looked at the relationship between all-cause mortality by gender and the relationship with different types of ecological domains. And you can see from the slide here that we observed some similar results in terms of green balconies, large urban parks and sea coasts being having a positive impact on all-cause mortality, but you can also see some differences. So all-cause mortality in females, there was a relationship between that and the distribution of derelict and abandoned spaces with wild areas, but also institutional green spaces. So that's where NBS have been incorporated into the fabric of a building, and also riverine environments, so environments that are involving NBS around streams, rivers, and estuaries. But those differences, those indicators weren't observed among mortality in men. And you can see that here that mortality in men was also positively associated with the distribution of sustainable urban drainage systems, but not in females. Now moving on to the relationship between all-cause mortality and ecosystem services. Our study found that a number of different types of both provisional, regulatory and cultural ecosystem services are related to all-cause mortality data. Now, these findings are consistent with a number of studies, for example, whereby urban food growing is having a positive influence on serious health outcomes. They're associated with comorbidities due to heart disease, diabetes and stroke, but also biodiversity loss has been linked to autoimmune disease, the incidence of cancer, as well as different mental health problems. And finally, I'm just showing here the results between all-cause mortality in men under 65 years and different ecosystem services. And here we can again see that services that influence the prevalence of heat and air and noise pollution are related to mortality in men, but also the incidence of but also the presence of services that are providing opportunities for recreation, physical exercise, and improved mental health. So in terms of overall conclusions, our analysis shows that there is a relationship between different characteristics of NBS and different types of their ecological domains and ecosystem services and health outcomes. In particular, we found that sea coasts, external green buildings, urban parks and play areas have a moderate to strong relationship with health outcomes that relate to mortality. As do regulatory and cultural ecosystem services. However, there are limitations to the study, and it's really important to emphasize that. These results don't prove causality. They're looking at the relationship with the data at a population level. Because we're looking at a city scale, there is obviously a risk of ecological fallacy within the data. And for some of the indicators, we do have a small sample available, so that they do need to be interpreted with caution. So obviously further research is needed to investigate whether or not there's a causal relationship between different characteristics in NBS and health. But I think these results kind of give us a flavour of where some of the where we might begin to see some positive impacts on health and well-being that kind of guide where investment in NBS in cities should take place. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Claire. I think your research is very important. That can really support cities to plan nature-based solutions and see which solutions are perhaps better for kind of boosting health and well-being of people. So thank you very much for your input. I would like to encourage all the attendees to ask questions through the chat function. So if you have any questions, please use the chat, and then we will try to answer your questions as we go and at the end of the webinar. And now I would like to introduce our third speaker, who is Konstantinos Gobakis. Konstantinos is a research associate at the School of Environmental Engineering of the Technical University of Crete in Greece. Since 2012, he is the main technical coordinator of more than 5 European funded projects. Regarding his presentation, Konstantinos will do a little bit, so the first 2 presentations were more about current research and the outcomes, but the last presentation will be about the project that is newly funded Horizon 2020 project called VAR Cities, about visionary nature-based solutions for health and well-being in 8 cities in Europe, from Greece to Sweden. And Konstantinos will show us what kind of solutions perhaps will be implemented in those cities, and what is the objective of the project. So I think it's very interesting to see what is going to happen in some of the European cities in this regard. Kostas, the floor is yours. I hope you can share your screen. Perfect, we can see it. I think you are muted.
Yes.
Great. Now we can hear you.
Yes. Good morning to all of you. Sorry about that. And very nice to have you here today. As Jurai mentioned, I'm part of the coordination team of the newly funded VAR Cities project called. And today we'll present you the project vision, challenges, a perspective for our project. We are a part of 25 partners from all over Europe, with a strong emphasis on SMEs. So have 10 SMEs, 7 public bodies, municipalities in our case, 5 research institutes, and 3 universities. Our vision is to implement real visionary ideals using nature-based solution in order to add value by establishing sustainable models for increased health and well-being for children, young people, middle-aged and elderly, through our exposed to a diverse climatic condition and challenges around Europe. What we want to achieve in our project is to shaping of future cities by developing nature-based solutions to tackle city challenges, create innovative solutions to integrate digital, social, and cultural aspects in 8 cities around Europe, to support co-design and co-creation process for the development of the visionary solutions that will implement in each one of the 8 case pilots, development of a monitoring framework through innovative health and well-being VAR Cities online platform, to have access to sustainability and impact interventions through development of a new and advances in existing key performance indicators based on inputs received from municipalities, satellite data, citizens, and other sources, support the innovation for governments, business, and financial models, and provide new business opportunities for Europe to create a new network of stakeholders. Here you can see that we have 8 cities from the district level to the large scale, so from urban gardens to urban parks. Each of one of the cities will have a uniform solution to tackle some issues of, let's say, environmental stress reduction, tackle social tension and inequalities, access to culture, and improving health and well-being. And we focus on some cities, some pilots on specific problems. as climate change mitigation, urban ecosystem, and sustainable development. In order to have an overview idea of all the issues and solutions, we'll create the Far Cities ICT platform that will get data from various sensors from each one of the cities, and also incorporating open data from various European and local databases as GEOS, Copernicus, Citizen Observatory, in order to give us a uniform solution and cover all the aspects that we want to implement in our future cities. Our methodology is a bottom-up one that we want to have visionary cities project in tackle different health and well-being, climate-related risk and environmental threats under different climatic conditions. We will implement several visionary solutions per pilot case. We will promote the advancements of new innovative ICT products and services to integrate various wearable sensors to bring them to the next level of integrated telehealth in order to be used in open spaces and indoors, and to integrate behavioral and psychological aspects by customizing apps, artificial AR and VR, in order to have different outreach depending on the people in and its different pilot. Here you can see, as Zurai mentioned, that we cover almost all the climatic regions of Europe, from the hot and dry summers of the Mediterranean area in Chania in Greece and Giza in Malta, then going to the Central European climate of Castelfranco in Italy and Novo Mesto in Slovenia, moving a little bit in Leuven in Belgium, then going to Dunkirk in Ireland from all Atlantic climate conditions, going up to the colder places in Norway, and one of the coldest, I think, in Skellefteå in Sweden. In each one of the case study pilots, will present now what are the driving factors that will implement the visionary solution. As I mentioned before, we are a bottom-up solution, so we have defined what will want to be the final solution. We haven't decided yet. It will be decided by the local engagement. So in the Skellefteå pilot, we want to reuse an old landfill in order to develop a new residential area by utilizing nature infrastructure and creating increased biodiversity by creating wetland beds. We want to create inviting meeting points in the nature for people, and on those meeting points to integrate classrooms in the nature. So preschools and school kids can go out and interact with nature. And finally, to level up the citizen awareness of climate change and importance of biodiversity by creating wetlands. Next, in Bergen, will re-establishment of an urban water park in order to develop governance model for green urban spaces, the support of sustainable, democratic, and inclusive designification, to interact and increase the interaction with citizens, students, schools, and stakeholders to co-create and co-design the public green spaces, to integrate geographic, green mobility, and nature-based solutions to promote the health and well-being in parks, while preserving the biodiversity in green park zones. We want this to be measured with actual numbers, so we will measure the we will conduct wide health and environmental studies alongside with with the help of technology and epidemiological studies, and also to promote the citizens' observatories that are already present in the area. And finally, we want to promote technological solutions to improve, to reduce the local carbon footprint, and a very good a digital means to present to the people. Next, in Ireland, in Dulcalc, we'll identify a new way of interacting of the people with the library and the museum quarter to be easily accessible to all members of the community, to create new quality public spaces, to increase the connectivity and legibility of the streets of the surrounding of the community, to improve the access of all members and the visitors or tourists to the town, to enhance the heritage aspect of the old city, and to promote sustainable development principles through minimizing the energy consumption and maximize the use of renewable energy sources to the pilot case. And finally, to ensure the scheme is maintainable as respects the today's need as well those of the future. In Castelfranco, we will move to a different aspect, that we want to create a health garden for elderly and people suffering from Alzheimer's disease. So we want to contribute by designing and future shaping of the future of the cities, by developing nature-based solutions integrated with digital, social, and cultural innovation in order to be applied into our pilot case, but also to the other sites that the municipality of Castelfranco Veneto has provided us. We will create visionary solutions for nature based on nature base in order to address the health and well-being of elderly citizens and patients affected by Alzheimer's disease by co-creating forward planning solutions with the local authorities, and assess the sustainability and impact of intervention through the development of new and advance of existing health and well-being key performance indicators based on interdisciplinary research from various partners. In Novo Mesto in Slovenia, we will regenerate an old military brownfield in order to create high-quality recreation facilities, to provide access to therapeutic activities to people with special needs, to reduce obesity and improve motor skill of children, and to promote the healthy aging of the people. All of that, we want to implement some aspect of raising the environmental awareness and in the finalizing to improve the acceptance of diversity and to facilitate the creation of a new therapeutic services in the area. In Giza, we will move to another opportunity to take back the roads from the cars and provide them to the people. We want to change the character of the cities through the improvement and establishments of nature-based solutions for the reduction of pollution and to identify and implement green roofs, green spaces, and green areas surrounding the road, and to promote the alternative means of transportation. One major objectives to lobbying with the government to give us back the road, to reduce it from the two-way road to one way in order to have more space to greenery. And finally, to design citizen science activities and citizens drive local air quality and mobility campaigns to improve the awareness of sustainable actions to mitigate air pollution and to promote shared environmental responsibility. In the Chania case study, we want to create mobile urban living rooms for open spaces in order to increase the environmental awareness of citizens, to integrate them in the everyday life of the people, to increase the sense and respect for the public spaces, and to provide economic opportunities through green digital strategies, and to promote the increase of urban interaction. And finally, in the 8th and final pilot sites in Leuven, we will regenerate of an old former hospital sites. We will implement nature-based solutions with digital, social, and cultural innovation with a very high degree of replicability. All the solutions will co-created by the public, local authorities, and industries, and will measure them by developing new KPIs for the city. Our final output and what we want to achieve in our projects is to create high quality and multifunctional public spaces, as well convert them into a safe, inclusive, and accessible places to ensure the improvement of citizens' health and well-being. To promote the co-design and co-creation of planning and governments to the 8 pilot sites and following cities with digital and social dimensions, to generate a new network called Health Cities Helix and have ambassador for the gender dimensions, to promote the innovative solution of monitoring and promote the key performance indicators to be based on actual measurements, and to promote our SMEs, as I said, is around half of our consortium, to support the capitalization of over 30 years of investments in transnational EU research and innovation on sustainable urban development, and of course, finally, to have new business opportunities for all. Thank you from all the VAR team's project. Please visit our website and follow us on social media. We'll have very grateful news to promote you in the next months. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kostas, for your presentation. Really interesting to see all those solutions that you will implement in 8 cities. So yeah, now I would like to invite all the speakers to turn on the cameras for the Q&A session. I'm aware of the time. We have 5 minutes. So maybe the first question, maybe I can start with the first question to Kostas. Kostas, will these solutions that you will implement in those cities, will they be replicated further to other cities that will be perhaps interested to also do something similar?
Yeah, of course. We will have some guidelines of the cities on how they can first interact with our platform, the VAR Cities ICT platform, in order to get as much data as they can from our platform, and also to show them how we started and what we use in order to populate that. So how to gather the data. And then we'll have a very good guidelines and help from our projects if they want to implement some of their solutions. And as you know, we have 10 SMEs, so it will not stick to the scientific community. We'll have some people that they want to make money from it. So they will have a business model for that in order to have synergies with both public sector and the enterprise and the small and medium enterprises in order to promote these solutions.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. That's great to know. If there are cities in this webinar that are interested, I guess you can get in touch with the project and then use some of the outcomes. There's a question for Claudia, how to better value such benefits of green spaces in cities. So Claudia, what do you think? What would you answer?
Oh, yes, I mean, very briefly, I think that's where we have to go, no? I mean, to find a way in cities to really value them in another way. And I think the pandemic is giving us that opportunity. I mean, as planners, as cities, because there's, I mean, we spoke for years about creating awareness, and I think this pandemic somehow created the awareness that we were aiming at. So it's probably a moment for the city to be braver and to really try to, I mean, to focus on this and to understand that beyond the economic valuation and the very hard and difficult modeling that we as scientists used to propose, I mean, there is now, I would say, a critical mass that is asking for this. And that, I mean, simply we should try to really, I mean, invest in it and to follow, no, what is there. So I think that's a bit the idea.
Perfect. Yeah. And question for Claire. Claire, what do you think, which, based on your research, which nature-based solutions you would encourage other cities to implement to really boost health and well-being of people? And perhaps which one are those and which ones are kind of easiest to implement, taking all the things like space limits into account and perhaps other challenges that you might have kind of encountered in your research? Yeah.
Well, I think for me, it's not about the type of nature-based solution that you implement. I think it's about the how. So in our research, we see that those areas that are disadvantaged, that have less access to green space, but are more at risk of the ill health effects of climate change, those are the citizens that could really benefit from the health from NBS. And for me, I think it's about trying to think about how we design different types of interventions that will benefit those communities, whether it be an urban park that develops a reach out program to really engage with citizens on the ground and disadvantaged groups, or whether it be it a sustainable urban drainage scheme whereby we're encouraging members of the community to get actively involved in its longer term maintenance. I think these are the issues that we need to think about in terms of the design of NBS going forward. That's where we're really going to start to see and realise the wider benefits for health and well-being from nature-based solutions. So I've not quite answered your question directly, because I think there are other issues that we need to tackle first before we say, well, this particular NBS is better than that one. It's about how we co-design solutions to create a number of different elements so that we're providing multifunctional NBS. That's what's really important. So they're not just for health and well-being, but they're for climate and addressing other challenges. Sorry, I'll stop talking now.
Yeah, Claudia, I think you want to react. Yeah.
No, I think, I mean, it's really great that you touch upon this, and you touch upon the maintenance, that it was something that was really also, I mean, that came out as a result of the survey, that people are willing to. And in this sense, in our work, we are also looking at what's the best way to do that. And what we are trying to prove is that basically working with local associations, so community, but recognized community in terms of association working as, I mean, we could call them NGO, this depends much on the different topic. There are a lot of active association in green areas. And basically, they could act as enabler of benefits. And that's something that we are trying to to provide evidences with our work. So basically, maybe giving funds to this association could actually boost much more the actual infrastructure. So even without thinking about creating new one, but the present one, in making it much more usable, I don't know if it's a word in English, and basically to, enable the flow of benefits of places that are already there, but maybe are not used in a way that it actually enable the flow of health and well-being benefits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so to utilize already existing green spaces to create higher quality green spaces, right? Yeah. Thank you very much for your inputs. I see that we are 2 minutes late already. Thanks to all the participants that you're still with us. I think we don't have time to answer more questions, but I'm really happy that you could join today. Maybe last point, as you know, we are coordinating network of cities. If you are a city and if you are interested to join our network, drop us an email and we can explore this option, how we can best serve you, how we can best bring value to what you are doing, and we will see each other, I guess, in 2 weeks. There will be a third webinar that we are now designing, so we will let you know about that in coming days. Thank you very much to all the speakers. Thanks to the attendees. Thanks to Andre Het, our colleague who has all the technical, who is managing all the technical aspects of this webinar. And see you in a few weeks' time. Thank you.
Thank you, Juraj. And thank you to everybody.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.